Well, good evening and welcome. I'm glad you're here. Most of you I know, some of you I don't know, so I'm going to say who I am. My name is Rich Blum. I'm one of the pastors here at Bethel Community Church, and we are really honored to have Curtis Bowers with us here tonight. You guys excited to hear what he has to say? A very important topic on the communist Marxist attack on America. How many of you realize that that is a huge threat to the church and to Christianity and to our culture? Absolutely. I'm excited to learn from him here and hear what he has to say. I just met him for the first time today, and I get to introduce him. And I actually don't know that much about our brother, but I have stuff written down. Hopefully it's all right, okay? It's not like he's raised by a pack of wild wolves, which I was thinking about, but I won't say. But he is a husband, which is really important. He is a father. He has two amazing sons who are here, and you talk about quality young men, you know it right away. As soon as you meet him, introduced to him, it's like, these guys are quality young men. That says a lot about him. He's a Christ follower. He loves Jesus, and he loves Jesus' word. The little bit things I have seen, it's really clear that he's biblical. He does things based on a biblical basis, and I'm very thankful for that. And that's one reason he is here. If he didn't do that, he wouldn't be here. But he is here because that's very much true of him. Some of you probably know this better than I do, but he's a former representative in the state of Idaho, former educator, restaurant owner, and filmmaker. Amongst his films is the award-winning documentary, Agenda, Grinding America Down, Agenda 2, Masters of Deceit, and by the way, has a table in the back, and these things are on sale back there, and so you can go to those two wonderful young men that I had mentioned earlier and see his table and see the different things, the materials he has. I think they'll be a great blessing to you. He also at least helped with a movie we showed here called Enemies Within the Church. How many remember when we showed that? Yeah, quite a few of you, and so it was really great. I know he was at least involved in that at some level. And so remember his table, also right in the middle. Now, we gave him something to come here, but I'll be honest, it's not that much that we gave him as a church. And so we have a love offering, and there's a box right in the middle of the aisle over there, a drop box. And whatever you put in there, all goes to him, okay? And if you write a check, it just goes to Curtis Bowers, as I understand. I think I have that right. So whether you do cash or check, you can do that. And I'll remind you again at the end, and if you can't, that's okay too. But I'm going to pray for our brother and have him come forward, but I want to let you know about the table. I want to let you know about the offering, and I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for coming. You know, it's encouraging to see a decent crowd here because I think this is an important topic. It's also encouraging to see children and young people here because I think it's a really important topic for them. Although, thank you all for being here, whether you consider yourself a young person or not. I'm going to pray for us. I'm going to hand it off. Father, thank you so much for Curtis being here. Thank you for his experience. Thank you. I know the Enemies Within the Church had a big impact upon me as I watched that. So I thank you for his impact on that. And I personally look very much forward to see the other two documentaries that we have back there as well, award-winning documentaries. I thank you for Curtis's expertise, his knowledge, his background, the many people he's come across that have shaped his life, the fact that he loves you and knows you and loves your word and is a godly man, and that he lives by biblical principles. All of those things are really important, and it's one reason he's here tonight. Father, my heart's desire is that he would feel welcome, that when he leaves, he'd be glad that he came here today. And I pray that for everyone here. As they leave, they'd be saying, wow, that was worthwhile. That really helped me get education, information that I need to be aware of and share with others, as well as maybe what do we do about this attack upon America today? So use this to prepare us, use us to be better prayers, use us to be involved in things that we need to be involved in to make a difference. Use this to glorify yourself and to advance your purposes. And again, Father, I pray as Curtis comes up, he'd sense your presence and your power, and that he'd know that he's amongst friends here. And I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Would you join me? Let's give him a warm welcome. Feel welcome, Curtis Bowers.
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming out. I know there's a lot of things to do in life, and Sometimes there's not time for everything, but I appreciate you being here. It's so nice to be with you. My boys and I think to get to this point, it's been 55 hours of driving from Alabama. We're from lower Alabama, right next to Florida. But it's been a blessing to see this wonderful country that we live in. Even the long deserts of New Mexico and Arizona, but they're so beautiful and different. This country has so much. It's really sobering every time we get to get out and see it. It's always a blessing, and the different people and the different ways people do things in different states and areas. You pick up the little accents or whatever, but it's been a blessing. My family and I have been traveling on and off for 14 years around America, trying to do our part to wake the troops to what's happening to our sweet, wonderful country, and trying to explain historically why it has so turned its back on God and his principles. And we see the results of that all around, and it's devastating. How many of you, I like to ask this before I get going, how many of you have seen the entire film of Agenda Grinding America Down? Okay, so just a few of you. Okay, if you have any interest in what I talk about tonight, you would really appreciate those movies. They are back there. That's what funds us wherever we go. But they're a blessing to people that love our country and love God. I've never met anyone that's watched them that didn't say, oh my goodness, that is a wonderful tool now I can use to help wake up other people and to get them involved in what's going on. And most of what's happened in our country is the fault of the church. I mean, it's us. We have to repent of that and say, God, we're sorry for not standing up. In 1962, when they took prayer out of the schools, if the 90+% of Americans that said they were Christians back then would have kept their kids home the next day, guess what would have happened the following day? Prayer would have been back in the schools. You have to have the kids. It doesn't work. But they weren't willing to do that. They were just willing to complain. Oh, that's ridiculous they did that. And they kept their kids in there even though it's like, hey, wait a minute, this thing's changing. If you're going to take God out, are you sure you want your kids to be raised by somebody else that doesn't think God is important? I don't think so. Two of my boys are with me. I have 9 children God's blessed me with, and we have homeschooled them, which is the single greatest thing that I've done in my life that I'm so grateful. God got a hold of my heart when the kids were young, and I realized I need to do this. I need to knit my heart to theirs. So when I tell them, kids, this is God's word, they'll go, okay, Daddy. They'll believe me because they know I speak the truth. They know that I love them, and there'd be no reason for me to lie to them. And so, but I'm so thankful for that. I'm going to show just about a 90-second clip from the second movie. Just since my whole family's not here, it gives you 3 things I want to accomplish with it. 1, be able to meet my family. I'm so grateful for what God has given me, my family. Men, what God has given you with your sweet bride and 1 children, 2, 3, 4, whatever you have, has such great value. The world doesn't place the value on it, but if you have built those relationships and loved and invested, and you're as rich as any man alive, and the same goes for you ladies. The family was supposed to be something that God used to make every man rich. You could be in total poverty, but you had a good family, you were rich. And they've tried to destroy that. So I want you to meet my family. Hopefully it'll encourage you to watch the film as you see this little teeny clip of it. And then I also hope that it reminds you who God is. He can take any of us, regardless of how little talent we may have, and do great things if we're willing to obey. If we're willing to say, yes, sir, what would you have me to do? And then do what he has convicted you to do, and the things obviously the Bible tells us to do. The miracle of how God allowed that first film. I'd never made a film in my life, no background in film, didn't have a clue about it, but I felt God wanted me to make a documentary. And then the kids pray and fast every Friday for 22 months that will happen. That was voluntary on their own part. And then God chose to have it win that big film festival. It reminded me, God is God. The only reason he doesn't part the Red Sea anymore is because nobody's holding up the rod that he asked them to hold up. And he can do it whenever he wants. In Ephesians 6, it talks about this battle we're in. I think as things are getting later in the day and the mask is coming off of evil, this spiritual battle that is normally not visible to the eyes is starting to become visible. You can see the evil. You feel the evil. But God told us this 2,000 years ago. He said, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that ye may be able to stand against the wiles, the tricks of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. That's where we are today. There is spiritual wickedness in high places, in almost all the high places. And so tonight I just want to talk to you a little bit about the Marxist communist attack on Christianity. There was a man named Whittaker Chambers back in the 1930s, and he was in the communist apparatus in Washington, D.C., working his way into penetrating our government. And what's amazing is his autobiography is a book called Witness, which is one of the greatest books written in the last 100 years. And in that, he talks about what he finally drew him out of communism and took him to the foot of the cross was this. It's amazing how God does what he does with each of us. He said, one morning, I was watching my little daughter eat her porridge, and I noticed the design of her ear. He's one of the top communists in Washington, D.C. And he said, I saw that design. And he said, I knew there has to be a creator. There has to be. And that God used that little seed to start making him realize communism, this is not, they say man is God. And he's like, no, there has to be a God to create the complexity of that ear. But in that book, it's an incredible book, and he talks about his escape from communism, what got him into it, then what got him out of it. But he summarizes it down so clearly, you're like, oh, we try to complicate things. He said, the whole battle is this. It's God or man. That's it. Only choice. It's God or man. There's no, well, isn't there 20 different ways? Nope. You're either going to follow God, and there's only one God, who is Jesus Christ, who is the creator and the one that knit you together inside your mother's womb. And when you do that, when you choose Christianity, you get what we had in America for 200 years. You get this blessing because you're doing what he asked you to do. And so he says, I'm going to bless that. People say America is so exceptional, and I know what they mean by that. America is not exceptional, though. America is blessed because the founders said to the God of the Bible, we want you to be our God. And he said, I've been waiting 6,000 years for that, okay? And then all of a sudden we passed up all the countries of the world in no time. A little nothing country with a bunch of farmers and preachers and whatever. And it just rose to be the power of the world. Well, that was God's hand of blessing on that. So we see that, but when you pick man's ways, a lot of people don't get this. They think there's a lot of varieties of man's ways. There's not. There appears to be, but as I've studied this and studied just political systems, everything, the final destination of doing things man's way is communism. That's where you will end. Whenever you say to God, no, we're not interested, we're going to do our own thing here, it's going to eventually end in communism. A lot of people go, oh, we want to stop at socialism. But you can't stop at socialism. Why? Because it doesn't work. And so those in power, when you start running out of other people's money, the guns are going to come out because they're not losing power. So usually in the process of creating the socialist society, like Venezuela or whatever, the government has already disarmed the people. It's already taken control of all the water sources, the energy, so they can easily be, rough with the people very quickly. and just cut them off. Okay, what did we see in Canada a few years ago with the trucker convoys? These sweet, wonderful people. I was so impressed by the Canadian people, the fiber that came to that trucker convoy. They were so kind and respectful of authority and so just, honorable in what they were doing. I was like, I didn't know there was any fiber left in Canada. I thought they had fallen years ago, common sense and everything. But no, there was still a remnant there. And what did the government do? With a peaceful, as you could ever be, protest. Little jumpy toys for the children and picking up trash on the streets. I mean, you couldn't have got a more friendly, lovable protest. And they said, we're deleting your accounts. We're locking them up. We're confiscating your trucks. And they did, and they auctioned them off. And you lost your livelihood. You're starting to see the face of communism there, and it will slowly get more and more intense as society collapses. Now they're killing off their elderly, and they're encouraging suicides of their young people. So as you eliminate the people, you will slowly collapse, but that's what they'll get. A lot of us, we know that 2,000 years ago, Jesus had his 12 disciples. And by the end of their life, what was written about them? They turned the world upside down with the truth of the gospel. Pretty amazing. Today, who are Christ followers? Us, hopefully everybody in this room. But so what is our job on this earth? One, it's to make Jesus look good by obeying what he's asked us to do. That's how we glorify him, just cheerful obedience. But when we do that, we are accomplishing his purposes here on this earth. People then can look at a family and go, is that what God intended with the family? Yeah. Is this what a church is supposed to be like? Yeah. Is this how a business is to be run? Are you a Christian businessman? Yes. So we were to model this to the world. So they would go, wow, that you got something there. Yeah, we sure do. It's Jesus. That's the only difference. Well, I think for so long, we kind of knew those things, but we didn't realize, if God has his disciples and followers, are we not going to think Satan has his? Of course he does. And as I've studied this, it's crystal clear the communists are Satan's foot soldiers. Why? They are here to kill, steal, and destroy. You look at the history of communism, it's death, destruction, torture, suffering, misery. That's all Satan is about. That's all he has to sell anybody. He'll make it glittery so it looks or sounds good. He'll get a little Karl Marx puppet to write it up where it sounds like, I think we're going to create a utopia, when it's not supposed to create a utopia. It never was. 20th century communism was 100% successful in doing what it is supposed to do. The only reason they say it failed is it didn't get the entire world under its fist. And that is their goal, and they will not stop until that has happened. So that's the movement and what it is. A lot of people don't realize just what Marxism and communism really is. We hear the word Marxism used a lot more frequently today, and I don't know if people are trying to water it down. Marxism is communism. If you're a Marxist, you are a communist. Marxism is the philosophies, and when you implement them, you get the communist system. And so it's the same thing, but I think they realized the 20th century, when they killed hundreds of millions of people, of their own people, it kind of got a bad name, so we'll call ourselves Marxists today. This threat in America and around the world has been there for a long time, and it used to be even taken more seriously than it is today. This is Time Magazine, 1955. Listen to a couple sentences out of Time Magazine, 1955. The conflict between communism and freedom is the problem of our time. It overshadows all other problems. This conflict mirrors our age, its toils, its tensions, its troubles, and its task. On the outcome of this conflict depends the future of all mankind. That's how soberly a couple generations ago took this threat, and I think people are starting to awaken again. We thought when the Berlin Wall came down, everything, communism is over. And we see from Red China and so many other countries, oh, it's not over. It's perfecting the totalitarian controls through surveillance. And once they get it ready, they want to package that to the rest of the world. And that's their plan. The best definition I've seen of Marxism is from Vladimir Lenin, who was the founder of the Soviet Union. He was just a genius of strategy. Almost every left-leaning, progressive, Marxist, socialist group today, if you read their stuff, they got their marching orders from Vladimir Lenin. He was just really insightful in how to get other people, maybe even people that are your enemy, but how to motivate them and use them to accomplish your purposes. And listen to him explain that here. Quote, carefully, attentively, and skillfully take advantage of every, even the smallest fissure among the enemy. Seize every, even the smallest opportunity of gaining a mass ally, even though this ally be temporary, vacillating, unstable, unreliable, and conditional. Those who do not understand this fail to understand even a grain of Marxism. What does that mean? It means you become all things to all people so you can hopefully harness the energies of their life in accomplishing some of your purposes. A perfect example would be them coming up, some Marxist groups came up with the term to sell to the church, creation care. I was studying one of their groups, so they realized, okay, these Christians care about the creation, so if we throw a few Bible verses in there and maybe mention Jesus a little bit, these suckers will be pushing the radical Marxist environmental agenda, which has nothing to do with saving the planet and clean air, clean water, and stewarding our resources. It's all about totalitarian control, but we'll be able to get these people to do that. And they've been so successful for 100 years in manipulating people by making something sound good that isn't good. What does it say in the book of Proverbs? There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the ends thereof are the ways of death. Do you get that? That's twice in the book of Proverbs. It's so crystal clear. God's telling us, you can be on a path that seems right, but it isn't. That's why we need wisdom and counsel. We need to understand the times. We need to be prayerful in what we do, because it's very easy to get caught up into something that sounds really good, but it is not good. What are their plans? Their plans worldwide, they have not changed. Vladimir Lenin told us 100 years ago, back in 1920, he said, quote, first we will take Eastern Europe, then the masses of Asia. We will encircle the last bastion of capitalism, the United States of America. We will not need to fight. It will fall as a ripe fruit into our hands. It's so amazing to me that he knew 100 years ago all the things they were doing inside of our country to rot us from within, that pushing the immorality and the pornography and the everything. And they knew when we get to America, once we've encircled them, they're just going to collapse from within. And we see that day approaching. Red China has said they will take us on the ground by 2035 with troops. That's their stated purpose in their writings. We'll see if it happens or not. But so they haven't stopped in any of this agenda. Everyone thinks, oh, communism is dead and gone, whatever. They're building up their military in China right now at the fastest rate any country ever has in history. And they're going to be in a few years so superior to us, it's not even funny. Russia is already so superior to us in nuclear capability. They have over 6,000 nuclear warheads, and they have this hypersonic, supersonic ones that go up to 10,000 miles an hour. We have nothing that could even shoot it down or chase it or whatever. And their individual warheads will have 25 warheads in each head. So one missile could take out 25 major cities, because each of the warheads is about 1,000 times as powerful as Hiroshima. So it's a whole different level. And I don't think they plan on using that, because I think, no, they're going to fall like a ripe fruit into our hands. But they have these things, and all the while we're just fiddling around thinking it's going to be okay. Excuse me. I'm going to just go through some of the different things, the movements, and just show you how, as I've studied different movements and causes and things, I try to dig in, who are the top people behind this? And then I dig in and study them to go, what are they really all about? And almost without exception, it is a communist behind all of them. It's kind of like, you got to be kidding. The Black Lives Matter movement, okay? In their movements, here's 3 things about their movements I forgot to mention. Number 1, they always tell you where they're going. So if you read their writings, if you get subscribed to their journals and their newspapers, they tell you where they're going. You don't have to guess. Number 2, they always state their purpose as the opposite of what it is. One great example of that is some of the organizations I was studying in the communist movement, funded by communists and everything. There was a group in Chicago. This is funded by the communists, started by communists, and it's called the Committee to Defend the Bill of Rights. Wonder how many conservatives wrote them a check. Bill of Rights? I think that's good. Yeah, here, let me help you out. When it's to destroy the Bill of Rights. And then number 3, they always accuse you of doing what they are actually doing. That's a key thing. You have to understand the enemy, like Sun Tzu said, or you will always be deceived, always be confused about what's going on. Well, the Black Lives Matter movement, if you go to their own webpage, on there, the 2 women that started it, they have a video talking about, and they say, we are trained Marxist organizers. And they have a communist flag on the wall behind them. So and I knew that's what it was. And so I knew back in 2015, as I was studying them before the riots, I knew, okay, if the communists are calling this Black Lives Matter, that means its purpose is the opposite. It means black lives don't mean anything at all. And sure enough, when the riots started in 2020, what did we see them doing? They go stir up the communities of the black young people to go out and burn down the stores where they might have gotten a job, burn down their neighborhoods. The leaders don't get caught. They slip out in the night. The young people get arrested. Then they have a criminal record. They have no place to get a job, and they sink further into the hole. It wasn't about helping the black community. It was about using the black community to create the chaos you desire to get more power and control and to create a bigger problem. So now it's even a bigger problem in the black community. They love that. That's how they manipulate people to harness their resources, because they'll blame their condition on the white racists, whoever, who burned down their neighborhoods. The BLM people encouraged them to do that. They did it. But they'll blame them on the white supremacists or whatever, some magical thing, so they can harness their energies again to do it again in the future. I think it will be happening in spades before the coming election. Okay, the next one is so key. The environmental movement. The environmental movement is so vital because it's something we all care about. Every single person on the planet wants clean air, clean water, and to steward our resources. And they knew that. So they knew if we pick this, everyone's for it, but we'll package what it means to be green in our red agenda, with our agenda, so that we're going to use it not to help the planet, to enslave people, because that's our goal, to create more poverty, because that's our goal. Poor people are easy to control and easy to use. And so you look at it from that perspective, and I dug into this movement. I kept going back, went to the 70s and went to kept going, where did this modern environmental movement come from? And I was shocked when I got there. You know who it came from? I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but Karl Marx. The last paper he wrote before he died in 1883 was called Dialectics of Nature. And in that paper, he says we need to use the environment to convince people that the pollution from the businesses are going to block out the sun and we're all going to die, to destroy capitalism. That was the agenda. Then when it got stirred up again in 1970, the first Earth Day, do you know what day they picked? Vladimir Lenin's 100th birthday. Okay, this is communist to the core. It's called the watermelon movement. Green on the outside and red on the inside. That's what but they've sucked in millions that do care, because we do care. But if Dr. Patrick Moore, have you ever heard of him? He was the co-founder of Greenpeace, so a guy that cares about the environment. I flew up to Vancouver, British Columbia several years ago to talk to him because I wanted to meet him. And he has an environmental group up there. He cares about the environment and is still doing real things. But I went to him and I said, Dr. Moore, why did you leave your own group? And I was shocked by his answer. He left in the 1980s. He said, because the communists took it over. I mean, he was that blatant. I was like, what? The communists? Yes, the communists. He goes, when the Berlin Wall went down, all communists worldwide went into the environmental movement. They realized that's the future of one world government, world communist government, is the environmental movement. And I was just like, unbelievable. And most people aren't aware of this. But then you dig into the movement itself, you know when you're being brainwashed, when what you're being taught is the opposite of the truth. It's not just a lie. That's not very effective. It's the opposite of the truth. It has to be the opposite. Once you learn, well, like Lord Bertrand Russell, he had a huge influence on our American school system and John Dewey and everything. Here's what he said from an educational point of view. He said, we'll know when we've been successful educating the children in the schools when they are absolutely convinced snow is black. Think about how poisonous that is. Bertrand Russell said that. Everything is the opposite of the truth. When the kid's convinced, no, that's black. Snow is black. What are you talking about? It's the opposite. Then he goes, then we have been successful. That's what they're doing to your children and grandchildren. That's all they are doing. There might be a good teacher here and there that doesn't understand what's going on. I used to be a high school math teacher. I love young people, but I saw this 30-some years ago. I go, I don't want to be part of this thing. This is deceptive. They're going to use me as the excuse to keep their kids in here the whole time, and they're going to lose their kids because this is brainwashing 101, and that's all it is. And I left because I go, no, I can't do that because I really love these kids, and I can't teach them every class, stay with them all 13 years. I wish I could, but I couldn't. So, but then you dig into the environmental movement. You need to know these things real quickly. The foundational premise is CO2 is a pollutant. Okay? Well, if you got a real education, that should be laughable. CO2 is plant food. It's fertilizer for everything that is green. And here's the reality. The level of CO2 right now in the atmosphere is 400 parts per million. The movement that calls themselves the green movement is trying to cut carbon dioxide emissions worldwide, right? If it ever gets to 150 parts per million, everything green dies. Everything, which means everybody dies because that's what we live on. And they call themselves the green movement when they're cutting carbon dioxide. What's the optimum level? We just got a greenhouse and we're working with that, so I've been studying this. The optimum level of CO2 for everything that is green is 1,600 parts per million. We're at 1/4 of the optimum level of CO2 if you want what's best for everything that is green. And yet they call themselves the green. It's the opposite. It's a pollutant. No, it's fertilizer. Okay? This is important to understand this so you can try to pull people out of their trance of thinking they're doing something honorable by having a small carbon footprint. We should give tax credits to companies that produce carbon dioxide. So the more, it's not a joke. When you quadruple it, like in a greenhouse, as I've been studying these because we're setting one up, when you quadruple, it's amazing how God designed the planet. The plant growth efficiency goes up almost 100%, about 85%. What does that mean? I didn't know until I studied it. That means if you have a tomato plant inside a greenhouse, same size as the one outside the greenhouse, the one inside, if you can quadruple CO2, will produce 85% more tomatoes, exact same size plant. Do you know what the tomatoes are? Do you know what the wood is? We just drove through the redwood forest. Just so magnificent, it's hard to even. Do you know what it is? Everything you eat, everything, it's carbon. The plants just take water out of the ground, but then they sequester the carbon out of the air and solidify it in whatever God designed them to make. You want as much carbon in the air as possible. That's where everything comes from. Whether it's a blueberry or a cucumber, whatever it might be, or just a tree. It's pulling carbon. God designed these machines that pull carbon out of the air and solidify it into a substance. to a tomato, to whatever you're eating. That's what it is. It's not pulling it all out of the ground, because otherwise the plants would slowly dig big holes underneath them as they're pulling all this stuff. Those redwoods would all be in a big ditch if they had to pull all that out of the ground. None of that's pulled out of the ground. They're just pulling up water that has minerals and things in it, and then they're taking that sunlight with the carbon dioxide and solidifying it and turning it into matter, because God knew we'd need some things to eat and to burn and to have trees and to build. I mean, it's so unbelievable, but it's the opposite. They tell us the world's overpopulated, where if you study demography, we're getting ready to enter a time of depopulation that's never happened before in the history of the world. Because we've rejected the blessings of children, and it's worldwide now. Even Iran, I was studying Iran recently, even the Muslim countries, 1.7 children per woman. You have to have 2.1 children per woman just to stay stagnant. And America is now 1.72, but Iran, I was studying some of the Muslim countries, they're below replacement too. They're dying off. All of the European countries are at 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and have been for 67 years. So they're another 25, 30 years, there won't be any of those countries be there. That will be an Islamic continent and state, because they're in those states, the Muslims still are having children because the state pays for it all, so they're burdening down the system as part of their plan to take over Europe. So you see that last one, they tell us to be fearful of warming. You should be fearful of cooling. If you go down to the equator, I worked down there one summer helping some missionaries. So I'm standing on the equator. It's the hottest place on the planet. It is hot every day, all day long, year round. And you notice something though. Life loves warmth. The biodiversity of plants and animals was unbelievable. They had thousands of species of plants, insects, birds, animals that can't even live here. You wouldn't have them here, and it's too cold. They can't survive here. You go up to northern Canada or Alaska, and you notice something real quick. Man, there's only a few species of trees, only a couple animals that can even survive in the cold. So the whole thing is a lot. If we could raise the global temperature a degree or two, which we can't, we have almost no effect on anything, but if we could, it would be wonderful. We would have hundreds of millions of more acres of farm ground in Canada and Russia to grow, hundreds of millions. And because they just have a long enough season now where they just can't grow crops. But if they had a few degrees more, they would be able to do it. It would be the greatest blessing to the planet. All lies, all the opposite of the truth, because that's what they're about. The homosexual movement and the transgender movement and everything, which God said not to do those things. Why does a Christian tell the homosexual, please don't do that? It's because we love them. Because we know they're on a road that ends in death. It's like if they were driving down a road in the middle of the night and you knew the bridge was out, to not say, stop, the bridge is out. You're gonna die. There is a way which seems right, but it ends in death. Please don't go down that road. That's loving to do that. But I know they're so fearful of that because they say, no, that's hateful. No, it's the most loving thing you can do is speak the truth kindly to somebody. But here's the Frankfurt School, one of the groups from my movies, 1932. Listen to this. This was strategic, them pushing different things like that. Wilhelm Reich, quote, we as communists used to debate people about the existence of God. And after a while, I came to a conclusion that this was a waste of time. You aren't going to debate people away from the existence of God. But what we found was that if you can get people involved in deviant sexual behavior, the whole idea of God just disappears automatically. You understand that? You get people sinning, and our young people sinning at a young age. You don't want there to be a God because you're guilty. No one likes that feeling of guilt. So you just, oh no, I don't believe in God anymore. Of course you're going to say that because you just don't want him to be. That's what they learned, these evil, he was a communist, Wilhelm Reich. They realized, no, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start poisoning the curriculums and the schools and try to get into the churches and everything because we want to take this place down. If you look at the feminist movement, that started in the 60s with a book called Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. And in this book, she writes about how it's the American family is a comfortable concentration camp. Well, unfortunately, she was such a great writer to make those ideas seem real. Tens of millions of women left their families or never got married to begin with, never had children, went out into the workplace to work for some man thinking that was going to fulfill them when everything that would have fulfilled them was right there before them. A happy, loving marriage and children. Do you know why they wanted to get the women out? Because the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. They knew, ladies, your position is the most powerful in the world. So they're going to tell you, oh, you ought to go have a meaningful job in McDonald's or for some corporation. Go work for Apple or something. Well, we'll take care of these little snotty-nosed kids for you. They wanted to raise the kids because, if you raise the kids, we got it all. And that's what it was about. It's the most powerful. You're forming the next generation. A woman has the most powerful position in the world. If her husband's the president, his job is not as important as that mother. He'll have a lot of influence for 4 years and then he's gone. Her children, as they go out, and the man's part of that, obviously, in helping that. As you're dying and going on, it's multiplying your influence in the world, not lessening. That's what God has designed every person to have a meaningful life through their family. But anyway, as you study Betty Friedan, she was a staunch supporter of Joseph Stalin. And I realized, she was a communist too, just doing her part for the communist cause to destroy the family. The church, what's happened to the church? Why is 90+% of all seminaries in America do not believe the Bible is the inerrant word of God anymore? Over 90%. Why? We found out in 1954, Congress interviewed one of the top communists in America who, after Stalin, it had come out that he'd slaughtered 20+ million of his own people. He was disillusioned with communism and he left the party and he came before Congress and they said, what have you all been doing to take us down? And before Congress, I've read the congressional record, in 1954, he said, the number one thing we've been doing is going into the seminaries and divinity schools since the 1930s, where we get our degrees and then we stay on as the professors. We want to control the church. Pastor, that's why you don't have as many buddies as you should have that stand up for the entire counsel of God, not just parts of it that are friendly or whatever. It's all friendly because it's truth. You're walking around in a minefield if you're not don't have a pastor that teaches you the whole thing. Otherwise, you'll fall in this pit because he didn't warn you about that one. You're falling that pit or whatever. You won't know. No, you got to go right here, and you'll be okay. But that's what happened. All purposeful and so deadly. You saw the college riots and things going on, a month or so ago. Someone that knew me, knew I've studied the communist movement forever. They were at one of those big rallies. And they grabbed a flyer for me, Organize the Intifada, a communist program for escalating the Gaza solidarity movement. And in here, it goes through their whole game plan. That's why I know in the fall, you can another summer of 2020, because all in here, we've got to escalate this before violence in the streets, burning down buildings, everything before the presidential elections. And so they don't miss a trick. If kids are stirred up over something, they'll go in and use them and redirect the energies. If they're not stirred up, they'll stir them up and then redirect their energies. They're so committed. We are losing this battle because they are so committed to the cause. I've read so many of their books and stuff. I'm like, it humbles me every time. I'm like, why am I not committed to the truth as much as they are to their lie? Communism does not create a paradise on earth. It's hell on earth. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all nations that forget God, is what it says in the book of Psalms. God said, that's what you throw me out, you will turn your country into hell. That's what does communism do? Throws God out, and it turns into hell. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I don't know if you're familiar with that name. He was a famous dissident, a writer from the Soviet Union. You got to read some of his books. They've been translated into English. Unbelievable. But he was in the gulags in the Soviet Union for decades. But he would write his writings and slip them out, and they would get back to America, and we printed up into books a lot of his writings. And they were top books, and he got the, I think, Nobel Prize for Literature and stuff. He was an excellent writer. But he gave us the first glimpse of what it was really like to live in a communist country. And after decades of being in the gulag, amazingly through some pressure from the US government stuff in the 1970s, he got released to come to America. He came there and all the cameras are on him. How did Russia fall to communism? What happened? Now, this is a guy that's very articulate and could have talked for hours, I'm sure, on 100 different reasons why that had happened. But you know what he said? Here's what he said when the cameras were grinding. He said this: we forgot God. That's all he said. We forgot God. That's why we fell to communism. It was so powerful. To show how far we'd already been at that point, he went to Harvard University, got invited there to speak. Just a famous world-renowned writer, gets there. When he was walking up on stage to speak at Harvard University in 1977, I think, right around there, the students booed him off the stage. Why? Because he's talking against the Soviet Union. That's the model for the world. That's 50 years ago at Harvard. You're booing the anti-communist. It's a famous writer and so wise. No, we don't even want to hear from this guy. We love the communists. That's where it goes. The communist goal is violent revolution. They tried that in America. A lot of people don't know this. In 1971. The Students for a Democratic Society, which was a communist organization at most all of our college campuses, the Weather Underground, which was a communist organization on most of our college campuses, they decided in their delusional state, America was ready for revolution. And in an 18-month period, this is Time magazine too, so it's not some fringe right-wing whatever, in an 18-month period in 1971 into 72, guess how many buildings the communists blew up in America? Now just think, don't get too high in your mind, but think. To have a building blown up, that's a pretty big deal in your country. This is America, 1971. How many? This is from the FBI. The FBI counted an amazing 2,500 buildings had been bombed in America in 18 months. That's 5 buildings a day being taken out for a year and a half. They were going they thought it would overflow into the streets and we'd just start killing each other off, but they found out something. America is too Christian for a communist revolution. They realized, nope. We're going to have to all go into education like Bill Ayers did, who was one of the heads of the Weather Underground. He spent the rest of his life at University of Chicago teaching students, but he also got on the curriculum, on the committee that writes the curriculum for all of our government schools. They know where to put themselves to have the most influence. But they realized Antonio Gramsci was right. Antonio Gramsci was a communist in the 1930s. And he understood, having been raised in a country that believed in God, in Italy. He said, you can't stir those people up to kill each other because they believe in God. And they know God said, thou shalt not kill, so they're not going to do that. But he wrote in a book, here's what you do if you want to take down a Judeo-Christian country. Here's just a few sentences. This is 1932. Any country grounded in Judeo-Christian values can't be overthrown until those roots are cut. Socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of the schools, universities, churches, and the media. It's called the Long March Through the Institutions. They realize we need to go in and get all the positions of power where we are influencing the people to become who we want them to be. And he geniusly said this. He said, not only will a generation rise up that wants what you're selling, big socialist government, he said, but they'll also need it because they'll have no more moral fiber or character enough to take care of themselves. We're getting close to that day, unfortunately. We see that all around us. But they knew Christianity, that was their enemy. That was the solution was get Christianity out. If you want to take a country over, get Christianity out of here and everything to do with it. Because that gives people freedom and liberty. And why do all the communist countries always imprison and enslave and torture Like today in the world, 200 people at least were executed just because they believe in Jesus Christ. They committed no crimes, anything. Why is that? One, because Satan's alive and well, but why all the slaughter in China and the persecution? Because a communist knows when someone believes in God and is a Christian, they don't have that control over them anymore because they're not scared of dying. They want you to be fearful of them. Like if you read 1984 by George Orwell, they want you in terror. So you just do as you're told, sit down, shut up, and do what you're told. Yes, sir. And you just do it. And you say freedom is slavery. And slavery is freedom. And you do like George in that book, or Winston. He just said, he just finally, the party's always right and I'm wrong. You submit because you're fearful, but Christians don't submit because they follow the Lord and they are happy to endure that if they have to, and God is with them if they have to endure that. We've gone through a cultural revolution, just like Mao in 1966 had the Cultural Revolution in China. Theirs was much more brutal. 60 to 80 million people died because they were not armed people. Our cultural revolution has been a little more behind the scenes because we're armed. And so, but this agenda was the same. Mao said we got to get rid of the four olds: old culture, old ideology, old customs, and old traditions. That's why Christianity has to go. And all our traditions and all the things, no, it's got to go. Once you destroy the past, you can then raise up a generation that doesn't know where you came from, so they don't know how horrible it is, the condition they live under, because they don't know the past. And that's what they do. They've also always had a plan. I'm going to read you a couple of these, and I'm wrapping up here with a couple short things. Everybody doing all right? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Since most of you have not seen the movie, back in the 1950s, there was a book written called The Naked Communist by Cleon Skousen, who was an FBI agent, and he had gathered all the information the FBI had gathered from all the communist cells in America from the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and he finally compiled it into a list. And it was a list. Here's the 45 main things they're talking about doing to take us down from within. I'm just going to read you a couple of these, but they're from picture 50s and before America. These were the plans of the Communist Party USA. Goal number 17, get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism, soften the curriculum, dumb them down, and get control of the teachers' associations. You wonder why your schools are teaching what they're teaching. That's why. Isn't that amazing, the terminology there? Use them as transmission belts for socialism. What does that mean? Start teaching it as if socialist ideas, they're fair, they're good, they're right. Don't teach them about 20th century socialism, National Socialism in Germany or Soviet socialism in Russia. Don't teach them about that. Just say socialism is wonderful. It's where we just share everything and have a big picnic and we're all live happily ever after. Some of these were shocking to me as a Christian because I realized even in the 50s, the communists knew why America was great. It was our morality. That was the whole thing. And they got it and we didn't. Listen to this, it's pretty impressive. Goal 24, eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. They know you get an obscene culture, it just slowly starts to crumbling. I know you all know we've changed so much, but a quick story from my life. I love this one, that I remember it, and it's so powerful. I was about 7 or 8 years old, so early 70s. I went to the store in Tampa, Florida with my mom where we lived, and she was gonna buy some ladies' undergarments or whatever, so I had to wait outside on the sidewalk. They would never have allowed a little boy into a woman's department. And so I'm standing on the sidewalk waiting for her. On the other side of the doorway, there was a gentleman talking to someone else, and he was just a rough character. For back then, he was tattooed head to toe, which back then was not normal. Now I know it's pretty normal. It wasn't back then. I'd never seen anybody with all, their whole head, their neck, everything, and just back in the early 70s, that was unheard of. And he's talking to this other guy, and I'm kind of hoping my mom comes out soon. And while he's talking, to the other guy, he used the word hell. A couple minutes went by, I'm standing there, and all of a sudden, I remember this because it scared me. That's how I still remember this. He looked over at me, and I looked at him, and our eyes connected, and he walked right over to me and put his face right in my face, and here's what he said. Son, I'm so sorry for saying that. I didn't see you standing there. Do you understand how much we've changed? He knew you don't use the word hell in front of a child or a lady. And now I even tell most people go, what's the big deal about that? That's how much we have changed. He knew he talked like that, but you don't talk like that in front of a child. Or if a lady who had been there, I'm sure he would have done the same thing. Sorry, ma'am, I didn't see you. I wouldn't have used that word in front of you. I tell you, we've all, because it's been a long, slow march, we've moved so much further than we think, and we start to lose memory of the past, and we start thinking slowly the memory comes a little closer to us, so it seems like, yeah, we've changed, but it's not that much. It's night and day. Our country is unrecognizable from the country that I just grew up in, and I'm not that old, but maybe I am. Goal number 25. Pretty amazing. 50s America. Break down the cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Isn't that amazing? They knew. Most Americans go, well, what's wrong with that? Communists in the 50s knew it'll take them down. You get everybody looking at pornography, their marriages will fall apart, there'll be illegitimate children everywhere, and we got it. It's over. Unbelievable. Goal 26, present homosexuality as normal, natural, healthy. That's actually in quotes from the Communist Party USA in the 50s. How much we've changed. My dad's 90. I was at his birthday party a couple months ago. We all went down to Florida. And I saw the Naked Comics on his shelf, and I took it out for a conversation. Oh, Dad, I remember this book, whatever. And I opened to the list of goals, just talking with him. And on that goal, he had, with a black marker, the word homosexuality just blacked out completely. And I said, oh, Dad, why did you mark out homosexuality on the goal 26? And here's what he said, because he's had that book since 1961. He said he got it. He said, well, it sounds kind of silly now, I guess, but when I read that book, your mom was going to read it after me, and I didn't want her to even see that word. It was so offensive. I mean, he goes, if you would have said that word in public, you would be excommunicated from everyone. How dare you bring up something so vile? I mean, and a husband marked it out so his wife wouldn't even see it. So you can't look at that word. It's so vile. That's how much we've changed. And on, infiltrate the church, discredit the Bible, discredit the family as an institution, and on it goes. They had a plan. They've always had a plan. And that's why I call my films agenda. I said, this isn't some conspiracy, it's an agenda. It is a list they are checking off to accomplish their goals, and it's time to wake up. I'm going to read you just a paragraph from this letter here. And as I read it, think about, I hope all of you are Christians. If you're not, I'm so glad you're here, and I appreciate what you do to stand up for conservative principles and things. Happy to talk to you about that down front. I know the pastor would be too if you're curious about what Christianity is. But as a Christian, we have the truth. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He's everything, okay? And I'm going to read that. This is a letter written by a young man who went on a college trip down to Mexico and became a communist over the summer. And he wrote this letter to his fiancée, and he said, I can no longer marry you because I found a new love. And I'm just going to read it to you, and you analyze yourself. Are you as committed to the truth as this guy is to his lie? Listen to this. We communists have a philosophy of life which no amount of money could buy. We have a cause to fight for, a definitive purpose in life. We subordinate our petty personal selves into a great movement of humanity. And if our personal lives seem hard or our egos appear to suffer through subordination to the party, we are adequately compensated by the thought that each of us in his small way is contributing to something new and true and better for mankind, the struggle for world communism. There is one thing in which I am dead earnest, and that is the communist cause. It is my life, my business, my religion, my hobby, my sweetheart, my wife and mistress, my bread and meat. I work at it in the daytime and I dream of it at night. Its hold on me grows, not lessens, as time goes on. Therefore, I cannot carry on a friendship, a love affair, or even a conversation without relating to this force which both drives and guides my life. I evaluate people, books, ideas, and actions according to how they affect the communist cause and by their attitudes towards it. I've already been in jail because of my ideas, and if necessary, I'm ready to go before a firing squad. That's what's happened. We've all been busy entertaining ourselves to death, doing different things, but not paying attention to what was going on around us. The rot, the purposeful destruction of everything that holds up a civilization. You can't have a civilization when there's nothing underneath it, like the family and the church, and those have to be healthy and strong, or you're on your way out, as we see from world history, if you study world history. I'm going to tell you one last story. I'm done, and I'll end with that. I don't want to keep you too long. But to encourage you, I think our solution is that we live the truth, we stand for the truth, and we share the truth with others, which is the gospel if you're a Christian. That's the answer to communism, is the Bible and Jesus Christ. That's the alternative. You can do it man's way or you can do it God's way. And if you know what God's way is and you know who he is and what he did for you and the hope you have of heaven because of what he did for you, you have to share that with it's what every communist is looking for, whether he knows it or not. He's looking, that book by Whittaker Chambers I told you about, that's what he said. He was looking for purpose in life. He knew there had to be purpose, and he got sucked into the communist cause because it sounded like they had a plan. Well, I want to be involved in something. And everyone wants to be involved in something. That's why they can sucker people into the environmental movement. All the movements they create, there'll always be people drawn to them. And it won't be the facts drawing them there. It'll be they want to feel like their life has a purpose, because we were designed to have a purpose. And if you have no purpose, the first person says, hey, you want to come with me? I'm saving the planet. Yeah, I mean, you're in. Because it's natural to be in. Even if the facts don't make sense and all the detail, I don't care. When I put my head on my pillow tonight, I want to feel like I had a point to my life. Because I know the only alternative is for me to take my life, and I don't want to do that. I mean, that's where the world stands. And if you have the answer to go, hey, you don't have to do that, buddy. God has a great plan for your life. Here's the facts. But in 1961, my mom and dad lived in St. Louis, Missouri. And my dad was working full-time for McDonald's. And he was full-time in graduate school, getting a doctorate in electrical engineering, so he was really busy. My mom was pregnant with my sister, and the doctor had told her, you can't get out of bed for the whole pregnancy. You have to be on bed rest. You're going to lose this baby, and she'd already lost some before that. And so she stayed in bed, but she used her time wisely. This story, I love it because it's just, the point of it is this: be faithful in the little things. They're all that matter. Big things don't matter. The little things are what matter. Because it creates the faithfulness where then God multiplies your little things where they look like big things, but it was him doing the big thing. But I love this. They're in their early 20s. My mom reads a book by J. Edgar Hoover called Masters of Deceit. He had been, founder and head of the FBI, and he wrote a book in 1958 called Masters of Deceit. And in the book he said this: if you Americans do not wake up, the communists are going to take you over from within, these masters of deceit. And he said, I mean, he had agents undercover in all their cells. And he said, he had a whole chapter in that book on the church, how they're going in the church, Hollywood, schools, media, everything. Well, my mom read that book and it shook her up. And she said, Jim, you got to read this book. And he's like, I'm so busy. She goes, you got to read this book. And so he read the book. And here's what they did trying to make a difference. A couple in their 20s. In St. Louis, Missouri. My mom would get all the St. Louis papers delivered to her house each day. And she would read all the letters to the editor. And when any letter she read, when the person got it, understood what was going on, then she would call them up and say, we need you to start a small group in your home. And she would connect with them. And she said, for the first meeting of your small group, my husband's going to come over and give a 2-hour lecture on communism. So they would do this one night a week, even though they were so busy trying to make a difference. And my dad said, I came home one night, and it was pouring rain, and he goes, I was so tired. And right when I walked in the house, excuse me, Mom said, I got a meeting set up for you tonight. He's like, no way. But she said, you need to go. You don't know who might be there. He finally went. He drove across town in the rain, probably because of the rain. When he got there, only a couple people showed up. But my dad was faithful in the little things. He gave the two gentlemen a 2-hour lecture on communism. When he was done, one of the men came up to my dad and said, if half of what you said is true, we are in serious trouble. And my dad said, well, that's why I'm doing this, even though I'm so busy. They became really good friends. That man borrowed all the books my dad had read and stuff, and he knew more than my dad in just a couple months. And he came to my dad and said, Jim, I'm going to quit my job and write a book about this. And my dad's like, don't get carried away. He said, no, I've checked my savings. I have enough money to last 2 years. So this man quit his job. He researched for 2 years, and my mom helped him with a lot of the research. And he wrote his book. He finished the book January of 1964, but he couldn't get anybody to publish it because he'd never written a book before. So he had to self-publish it. Now remember 64 America, no credit cards, no internet, obviously. If you want a copy of his book, you literally have to send him cash or check in the mail. It's not in a bookstore in America. And in 8 months, out of his garage, he sold 6 million copies. And when Ronald Reagan was elected president of the United States in 1980, he said, I would never have been elected president of the United States if John Stormer in 1964 had not written the book, None Dare Call It Treason, the book from the man that came to my dad's meeting. It started the entire conservative movement in America. And I tell you that to tell you, maybe you're not the person to write the book, but you might be the person to influence the person that writes the book. We just need to be faithful right where God has placed us, to stand for the truth, speak the truth, live the truth. Make sure the words you speak, when you say what you believe, your actions match that. The world can do nothing against that light when your talk and your actions line up. It's so powerful. And that's what we're to be as disciples of Christ. We're supposed to be that example the best we can, where the world just says, man, you're different. And let me tell you why I'm different. So anyway, I appreciate you being here. We have those videos back there and some of the books and things. Here's my son to remind me, I always forget about this. And we, again, this funds us, but if you had any interest in what I was talking about, I know you will like these. I'm confident of that because enough people over the years like, that was the greatest thing ever. So it's a powerful source, and it's so much better than me just talking. It's just a well-done 2 documentaries and everything. This bag we have, it has multiple copies of all the different things we have and our family music. When we traveled all together before some of the kids grew up and got married, we would sing too before the meetings and everything, which was a lot of fun. And they have beautiful voices. But this is $100. I think it's $200 online, all the stuff in there. Those that want to get a little bit of everything to broaden your influence. That's the point of all this stuff. So you read it, you watch it, but then you share it with someone else. Or you invite people over, hey, come over, I'll make popcorn, we'll watch a movie. You're trying to, each of us, influence whoever God put in your circle of influence for truth and righteousness. Time is the most precious thing we've been given, and you never know how much is left either. Don't put off things you know you should be doing now. Whether it's the phone call, the friend, the sharing the gospel, the telling your children you love them or grandkids, or whatever. We need to live each day knowing we are not guaranteed tomorrow, and be faithful with it one day at a time. That's the Christian life. Faithfulness today. We're not supposed to worry about tomorrow. God said, you got enough problems today. just follow me. Excuse me, today. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Pastor.